the main cause of expansion for 3 reasons. Formerly, the surface gravity would have been unacceptably high. The magnitude of expansion is probably too small, and the argument for such a reduction in g were considered not to indicate an exponential rate of increase in radius. So g would have had to change exponentially as well. And a cosmological cause involving a secular increase in the mass of the Earth, this suggestion remains a popular theme. And I think what he means by that is that there's basically some energy process going on within the Earth, and that energy is somehow being transmuted into matter and thereby creating mass. If you watch that talk that I've got, that Maxwell goes into that in a bit more detail. I don't claim to understand it, but again, it's something that we don't have an answer for. Another model that came up is whole Earth decompression dynamics. This is basically the last thing I want to mention. And this guy, I did write to this guy, unfortunately, but he didn't respond. What he proposes is that the Earth actually, when it was formed, I quite liked his explanation, but it doesn't quite explain things fully. When the Earth first formed, it was perhaps the size of Jupiter, and it had it was like a large gas giant with many outer layers of gas. And then what happened was there was a huge solar wind. It's called a T-Tauri event, T-Tauri super solar flare, and that stripped off the outer layers of gas. And then what happened then is the core had been compressed by these outer layers, but once they'd gone, the core slowly started to decompress because it didn't have all that around it. But I don't think there's much evidence for that other than explaining the expanding Earth. So that would also mean that the Earth had a constant mass. In other words, it wouldn't increase in mass. In fact, it would have gone down in mass when all this was stripped off, and then it would have expanded. So the constant Earth mass thing doesn't explain the change in gravity, at least not by the current theory of gravity, and therefore doesn't explain what happened with the dinosaurs. I wrote to him to ask him that question, but he didn't write back to me, so I don't know what his answer was. So, conclusions then. Contrary to the Hollow Earth study, the expanding Earth evidence is much, much more compelling when you get to the right sources of information. I personally have no doubt that the Earth has been expanding since at least the age of the dinosaurs, maybe since before. And it is now up to mainstream science to catch up with this. If you look at Maxwell's PhD, which is available online, you can look at all the evidence he's put in there, and it's massive, it's huge, it's legendary. Perhaps, and I tie this in, perhaps our Earth is a living, growing entity. Some people think that the Earth itself is a being of some kind. Maybe this is, it's growing in some kind of physical way as we ourselves do, but over a much longer period of time. I find that idea quite appealing. There's no scientific proof for that, of course, but I find it quite appealing. And it may be possible that other planets grow. If you look at Neil Adams' thing on Mars, that's quite interesting. But again, we don't have a lot of data. We can't measure we can only look at appearances on other planets. We have limited knowledge about the geology compared to the Earth. So that's basically it. James Maxlow's website for the expanding Earth is jamesmaxlow.com. You can look at those videos of the expanding Earth that Neil Adams is, but they're very illustrative, but not very scientific. You can look at them on his website and on YouTube. Stephen Hull's website is good to look at, dinox.org. And then there's a couple, the Hollow Earth site's a very, very mixed bag of stuff, but those are probably the better ones that I picked out that seem to have some of the science and stuff on there. So that's basically it, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming along, and particularly those that have come a long way, and thanks very much for listening as well. Thank you very much.